1, 2, 3.
The following audio exclusive is the full uncut discussion from our episode Trans Lives Depend on Owning Our Stories.
Trans liberation has become the latest frontline in the struggle for civil rights, a hinge issue. It intersects with every racial, gender, and class reckoning of our time. The ways trans people are represented speaks volumes about our culture and shapes all of us in complex ways. Trans liberation, in turn, just may help to make all of us more free. But to move forward, we have to understand where we've come from. In their new film, Disclosure, Sam Feder, Amy Scholder, and Laverne Cox use over a century's worth of film to show how anxieties about trans identities have always shown up in our culture. Hollywood, past and present, has had a lot of power to shape not just attitudes, but how we feel and act, and generations of trans people's lives. With that history as a background, Disclosure explores what's next for trans liberation and what a culture with trans voices at the center might look like and feel like. And the makers of Disclosure aren't just sitting back and hoping, they're actively using their powerful documentary as a tool for social change. Disclosure won the GLAAD, Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, Media Award for Outstanding Documentary this year, and has been nominated for a Peabody for its compelling and empowering story. With me to discuss the film and what they're up to are actress, activist, executive producer Laverne Cox, director Sam Feder, and producer Amy Scholder. For those in our audience who have yet to catch Disclosure, it's streaming on Netflix. Here's a trailer. Check it out.
Do you know that feeling when you're sitting in a movie theater and everyone's laughing at something and you just don't get it?
Can't find a better man.
I hate everyone else in the world but you.
I never thought I'd live in a world where trans people would be celebrated on or off the screen.
Thank you so much for this moment.
I never thought the media would stop asking horrible questions.
How do you hide your peanuts?
And start treating us with respect.
You kept it quiet because you said you didn't want to become othered.
Now, look how far we've come.
We have so much more representation in government, in media.
We are everywhere.
And you never know what those positive images do for other people. You never know.
For the first time, trans people are taking center of their own storytelling.
At this point, where we're talking really about unprecedented trans visibility.
That's my sister! Look at me!
Trans people are being murdered disproportionately still.
That's the paradox of our representation is the more we are seen, the more we are violated.
The more positive representation there is, the more confidence the community gains, which then puts us in more danger.
I go into the women's restroom, then I've committed a crime. If I go in the men's restroom, then everybody knows.
I think all of us in the community have had those moments of being like, is this going to somehow alienate people who aren't ready yet?
Why is it that trans issues have become like a front and center issue in the culture wars?
I think capitalizing on people's fear is what has landed us in this moment right now. And you have hope on one side and fear on the other.
I think for a very long time, the ways in which trans people have been represented on screen have suggested that we're not real, have suggested that we're mentally ill, that we don't exist. And yet, here I am, yet here we are, and we've always been here.
Coming out of the trailer, coming to you, Laverne, there is a notable appearance by Oprah Winfrey in that trailer. And in your film, she makes a few appearances. She made an appearance in my Twitter feed the other day, mentioning the film. Tell us what was notable about that.
It was wonderful to see that tweet. I'm a huge admirer of Oprah Winfrey. She's one of my idols. She just recently did an interview with Elliot Page, his first televised interview since he's come out as trans. And apparently Elliot told Oprah and her team that they should watch Disclosure before the interview. And she did. And she said lovely things about how she learned things that she didn't know, and how important the film was for her in terms of giving her new understanding of the subject, which is so amazing, because anyone who's a huge fan of Oprah knows that Oprah's been interviewing trans people for 20 years, and that those interviews, they've been troubled. And it's not to diss Oprah, because I would never do that, because I love her so much. It is just that representation for many, many years, as Disclosure shows, of trans people had a certain level of discourse that objectified us, reduced us to our bodies, and ultimately dehumanized us. And so what is so exciting about Disclosure, about Oprah's evolution here, and the impact the film is having, is that folks are understanding that history. And so now we can begin to write a better history, a more humanized history for trans folks in America, and hopefully globally.
Well, Amy, I'm guessing that's why you got into this project. It is changing lives. It has the capacity to change lives. And that's been your business since I first knew you as an editor of feminist and culture-forward books. Why this film now for you? Why a film?
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I have spent my career in book publishing, raising and lifting the voices of marginalized people and people whose stories have not been centralized. And that's been my calling, and in particular, LGBTQ folks and our stories. I met Sam when he was premiering his last film about Kate Bornstein. Kate Bornstein is a queer and pleasant danger, a beautiful film about a beautiful person who happens also to be one of my authors and dear friends. And when I learned about Sam's next project that he was just starting the research for, I understood immediately how important this work is, to tell this history, to center trans stories, to center trans people, and that Sam would be such a smart person to lead in this project. So it happened organically, and when a year and a half later we met Laverne and she became involved in our project, it seemed.
Oh, it's such a great story. Sam, tell that story. How did Laverne get involved in all this? And it seems like an example of why you should attend conferences and speak at them.
You know, when I started making the film, everyone that I talked to about it was like, "Oh, Laverne Cox should be in this film. She would be so excited about it. You know, maybe she want to help you make it." And that's just like, I'm not that kind of person that's going to reach out and ask someone, you know, of Laverne's caliber, you know, of her celebrity, of her, you know, of her notoriety. That's just not my style. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds great, but there's no way that's ever going to happen. But I did wish that we would interview her. And we have enough friends in common that I thought that would maybe be possible, that I at least get to ask her if we could interview her. So that was sort of the background of, you know, the years leading up to it. And then I was invited to present some of the initial research I had done at Outfest Film Festival out here in LA in July of 2017. They dedicate a day or two to what they call the Trans Summit, where they focus on trans storytellers and trans issues. And they invited me to give a 20-minute presentation. So I talked for about 10 of those minutes and showed a 10-minute clip reel of some of my research. And while I was talking, I looked up towards Amy, she was in the audience, and sitting right in front of Amy was this beautiful blonde with sunglasses on, reflective sunglasses, and I think a hoodie, like trying to be subtle. And so immediately I knew it was her, and I also immediately knew I probably had just mentioned her in what I had been talking about. But what I was taken by was she was so engaged, right? She's nodding along, and she's so engaged. I look over at Amy, and Amy's like,
Amy couldn't see because Laverne was sitting right in front of her, very tall. Laverne, what were you thinking?
So random. I woke up that Saturday, and I've been in Los Angeles for a year, and was just missing community. I was just missing trans folks and the community I built in New York. And I was on social media and saw that Angelica Ross and Jen Richards were on this panel at Outfest. And it was literally like 11:15 in the morning, and it was starting at noon. So I jumped out of bed, didn't put any makeup on. Maybe I showered, I don't know. I got dressed and got into a Lyft and went. And the second I walked in, I saw Nick Adams from GLAAD, and he said, oh, I'm so glad you're here. This guy is presenting this research. It's like the transcellular closet. And I was just like, wow, that sounds really cool. And so I was super excited. And then, so it just was so random, but it really feels shared. It feels that it was meant for me to be there that day, that the universe like said something to me, girl, get up and go. And the research was just so impactful. And I couldn't even believe that there was footage from like 1903 and 1915 and silent films. And so I was just blown away by it. And we talked after the presentation, and then we met a week later, and here we are.
Yeah, well, it's so powerful. And I want to just commend all of you, because even though there's some really cringeworthy and stomach-turning, horrendous, phobic appearances and statements by people, and there are some people who deserve a lot of hate, like D.W. Griffith of Birth of a Nation, who it turns out was also obsessed with trans identities, footage that you dig up from the early days of film. You don't actually demonize anybody. It's kind of like you just said around Oprah, Laverne, that some of these people, you love and hate them, and the idea of the film is for social change. To recap a little bit about the title of the film, it didn't really occur to me until towards the end, what disclosure referred to. Before there was disclosure, there was lack of disclosure, namely stealth. Sandra Caldwell talks about that in this clip.
You know what it's like to go on a set and be afraid? Your head is trying desperately to stay in the scene. You wake up afraid, you go to sleep afraid, you're trying to figure out if somebody's gonna drop the bomb that day, the next day, when is it gonna happen? So you're just afraid all the time. You got so much on the outside. We'll just see how much you got on the inside. But anyway, I did what I have to do. It's called survival. It's called survival. I'm all right. I will survive. I would never think for a moment that I was the only one. And you want to go and you want to say, girl, ain't we something? But nah, you just left it alone. I wish I could have. Man, wouldn't that have been good?
Coming back, it was important to all of you that the film didn't just depict trans people differently, but was made as much as possible by trans people. Can you talk about what that involved? Maybe Laverne, Sam, start with you.
Yeah, thank you. That's something I think we're all really proud of, and we knew it was just as important to have trans people behind the scenes as it was in front of the camera. I mean, everyone we interview is trans, but I think there's really not enough understanding of how every decision that's made behind the camera influences the story just as much as what is said in front of the camera, right? How it's lit, how you're framing somebody, like how you're talking to people, right? Who they're looking at when they're sitting in between takes. This all informs what you're going to shoot, what you're going to capture, and what the film is going to be. And so it was deeply important that was trans people that were going to be in that space. Also, trans people are disproportionately underemployed, right? I think it's 3 times the national average, 4 times if you're a trans person of color. And also being a trans person, whether by choice or circumstance, you just don't have as many opportunities, right? You either just don't feel safe or you're just not given them. So we prioritized hiring trans people on this set. And when we couldn't hire a trans person for a specific role, the non-trans person we hired mentored a trans person. So we had about a dozen trans fellows, mentees, and who have gone on to do incredible work, which just is so meaningful and so validating. And as much as we've been asked to do Q&As on our film, we've also been invited to development, inclusion, and equity trainings to talk about our hiring practice, because people are understanding that this is the way we move forward. Like, it's not about unpaid internships or the ideal of working your way up. Like, we actually have to mentor people and pay them as we mentor them to really level the playing field, to really give people the opportunities to do the work that they want to do.
Yeah. Coming to you, Laverne, on that question and more, there's the film and then there's all the work that's happening around the film. I mean, you are as much actress as activist. I don't know whether you put one before the other, but boy, you do a lot of both. On the activism side, how are you using the film and what impact is it having so far as you can see?
I mean, so much of it, I've been thinking a lot, doing some research on various things, and we know that when we dehumanize people, then we can discriminate against them because we don't think of them as human. And so much of the work for trans liberation is to see us as human. Right now, in this moment, during this legislative session, there have been an unprecedented number of anti-trans bills targeting transgender children in sports, and those children having access to gender affirming healthcare. And a lot of the ways in which these lawmakers are able to pass these laws is because of misinformation about who transgender people are. And so we've been very excited that lawyers from the ACLU are using the film to educate folks about our issues and the circumstances and how they've come to know and understand who trans people are, that judges, that lawyers, that organizations, that people in Hollywood are watching it so that they can better tell trans stories. A key part of our liberation is for us to be seen as human. And it is so devastating that in 2021, we still have to fight to be seen as human so that we can have rights. And so that is the work. And we're very excited about all the different aspects of how we're able to use the film in this way.
It's a very big we. I mean, you interviewed 30 trans people for the film, as I understand it. And in that 30, I mean, you probably could have interviewed, 300, and there would have been 300 different stories. Were there things that you learned, Laverne, in doing this as you listened to your fellow interviewees talk in different ways about race and gender and class and the way all these things line up differently, differently in each instance?
Well, every trans person has a different experience of something. And even as a Black transgender woman, I have blind spots. All of the, I watched all the films, what is it, The Florida Enchantment, and is that the name of it? My brain is not working. And all of these films, and Judith of Bethulia, and Yancey and Teak Milan and Brian had very different takes on those films as Black folks, right? Things that I missed and didn't quite see and understand. And so it reminded me of my own blind spots when it came to different things. Susan Stryker was such an incredible resource. Everything that she said about Judith of Bethulia was so interesting and exciting, and I didn't know before. And there were things that I learned.
That's the D.W. Griffith film, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There were things I learned during having lunch with Susan that day. I had never heard of Pauli Murray before sitting down with Susan during lunch break on that day. So there were just things I learned off camera that didn't make it into the film. So there's just always a lot to learn. And I think that is very, very exciting, and it's very humbling. And I think we all should be humbled, even if we think, our history, that there's so much to learn.
I want to thank you especially for the film having such a fair and equal representation of trans men in the discussion, and a big discussion about how, misogyny plays out in all of this as well. You, Amy, former editor of the Feminist Press, were the things that you learned? I was very struck, actually, by Yancey Ford when he talks about some sort of women empowerment narratives, whether you're talking Yentl or others, being dressed up in horrible trans man narratives that were only disempowering to him.
Right, wasn't that fascinating? Just in making the film, in our fundraising, this was my first producing credit. So when I joined Sam many years ago to start our research and development process, I felt like, I'm gonna surround myself with my feminist friends and my progressive filmmaker friends. And it surprised me how many folks were kind of unaware of trans issues or unaware of how, as feminists and as progressives, these are our issues. And it was hard to confront that fact. And it surprised me when I was describing our process and felt so proud of how we were going to prioritize hiring trans folks behind the camera. And it was surprising how many people would pull me aside and say, oh, let's get the best people. You don't want to, set a hard and fast rule like that. And people have come back to me and said, you were right. And I missed it. I didn't understand that you did get the best people, that you did hire the people who were going to be able to create the environment you needed to have the kind of intimacy and the kind of impact that those interviews have throughout the...
It's interesting. I was lucky enough to interview Heather McGhee recently about her book, The Sum of Us. And although she doesn't talk about any of this, she does talk about zero-sum thinking and how our culture has taught us that something that's given to some other group is going to be taken away from you. And I think that your film speaks to how the heck can we get beyond this? Can we get beyond this? And why is it so deeply embedded in our culture? And Sam, coming to you on that, it just really made me think, especially going back to those grainy black and white movies. It's like, really? At that moment, they were fascinated and obviously obsessed with these questions of trans identity. At that moment, where so much else was also in flux around race and gender and North and South and good and bad and bosses and workers, why does it go so deep, our obsession with the binary? Did you get smarter about that, Sam?
I think seeing that footage was validating in a weird way, right? It was frustrating. It was also validating to know that we've always been a site of fascination, right? And therefore we're clearly part of the culture. And just to also, so often marginalized people are told they're being too sensitive, right? That what they're experiencing isn't real. Like, it's just a joke, right? Have a sense of humor. But then when you start to see the data, right, and how deep in the culture it is, there's proof. And, we shouldn't have to prove that our feelings are real, right? That our experiences are real. But here's some proof of how deep this phobia goes. And it also just, it's this idea of, if you transgress what's thought of as normal, right? If you're transgressing a gender expectation, if you're transgressing a race expectation, or you're transgressing a hierarchy expectation, right? And so it's just all about keeping those in power in their safe place. And it's no accident, it's very obvious. And, those who perpetuate it possibly don't know what they don't know, right? Don't exactly understand what they're doing. It might come from this like weird survival like place, right? When you feel threatened, how do you secure your place? So it's quite fascinating as well as devastating.
And so exhausting. I mean, to be policing ourselves constantly in these little boxes to make sure that we don't get out of them. Laverne, I have to say, I came to this interview kind of wanting to, thank you and your fellows in this film for your service. It's like, my God, what you have gone through. Not to dwell there, but to talk about what is possible on the other side of that, which you also represent. Talk to us about what your vision, we talk about a tipping point, and you have that cover from Time Magazine, the transgender tipping point, culture is shifting. What's your vision of what's on the other side of this tip?
Healing and love and acceptance, and everyone's humanity is on the other side. But it's this thing. I had a beautiful conversation on my podcast, the Laverne Cox Show, with Brene Brown. Actually, we had the conversation first on her podcast, Unlocking Us, and she said, and she's always, I'm a huge fan of hers, and she said for years that when we deny our stories, those stories define us. When we deny something, our story, it defines us. But when we can own our stories, we can write a brave new ending. And for a very long time, we've been in denial about the story of trans folks in America and globally in cinema. And now that we have the information, the disclosures given us, we can begin to write a brave new ending if we own the story. And so there's so many elements. It's always intersectional, right? In the United States, we have yet to own the story of racial oppression in the United States. And it's harrowing to me to see how many folks who have mainstream platforms are in full-on denial that racism is systemic, that white supremacy is a thing right now. They are going on television saying that this is the thing that does not exist. And so there's this desire to be in denial. And that denial, that secret keeping does not allow us to own the story, so we cannot write a brave new ending. So for me on the other side, first, we have to tell the truth, and we have to own the truth, and we have to own the story, and then we can begin to heal together. And that is an intersectional process. It's about it's a feminist project. It is a racial justice project. It is interdisciplinary. It's a class. Certainly, it's a class equity project. So on the other side is a certain kind of equity, love, humanity, but it can only happen when we own the story and together collectively begin to write a different ending.
Sam, do you want to weigh in on that?
I mean, what more can you say? You know, that's it's a beautiful way to think about going forward. And my thoughts are really just kind of in parallel in the sense that the antidote to negativity is not positivity. Like the antidote to negativity is nuance, you know, and complication and messiness, but like really having a three-dimensional understanding of people's lives. And I'm not interested in a world where we're all the same, where I'm just like you and you're just like me. I'm not interested in a world where trans people are just part of the binary. I like being trans, you know, I like the fact that I've had to really interrogate my place in the world and understand how I can move in this seemingly static understanding. And I've had to find a way of making it really mutable and I like what it has done when I have to understand how people are looking at me, as frustrating as it is. But like, you know, I think the depth of introspection trans people have to do really is, you know, gives us a bit of a superpower in a lot of ways. Like really, you know, and I don't want to live in a world without gender. You know, there's a lot of talk about gender is over. And I think that's fine for people who want that, but I don't want that. Like, I think gender is beautiful and expansive and fun. And so, you know, and when I say it out loud, it sounds so idealistic. Like, I just want us to be able to be how we are without having to face the violence. Right. But I think that maybe that's the next step, right? We have to do what Laverne is saying, is we have to heal and we have to write a new ending. And then maybe we can live in this world where, you know, we can be all these things that we are in the privacy and our safety in our communities. And we can be in that in the rest of the world too.
Sam, we have to be able to imagine it though. We have to first be able to imagine it, to visualize it, and then we can have it come into fruition. So it's actually absolutely beautiful that you have that vision, because we have to be able to imagine it first, because for so many people, they can't even imagine it. And if we can imagine it, then we can begin to create it maybe in small pockets. And then folks can be like, well, what's going on over there? Come on in. It's great. It's gorgeous. It's awesome. you know what I'm saying?
Though, right? We have our small pockets, right? We have our queer space, and then capitalism comes and commodifies it. So that's a whole other conversation.
So Laverne, how do you negotiate that, Miss of the podcast, of the movies?
The capitalist part of it. The contradictions in being sort of being a capitalist, I guess, and working for multiple multinational corporations while trying to do this work and maintain authenticity. We're in contradiction all the time. You know, it is a very conflicting kind of space to be in. And it's like there's a, you know, folks talk about an inside game and an outside game. And I think at this point I'm maybe doing some sort of inside game, but it's not lost on me how difficult and challenging it was to sell Disclosure though. That a year ago, we were sort of, you know, a year ago this time, we weren't quite sure, you know, if we would even be able to sell this film, if people would see it. And then Netflix came along, you know, at just the right time for very specific reasons, and we were able to have that incredible platform. But it is still very difficult as I go out into the world and pitch trans-themed shows. It's still very hard to sell shows about transgender people.
Amy, you're nodding. You're nodding. Will the Peabody and the Emmy that you're definitely going to get change things?
Well, being nominated for a Peabody has changed my perspective. That was thrilling, and we're honored. We're hoping for an Emmy nomination. We actually have not. There are not Emmy nominations yet, but we're hoping for one. I think these awards, you know, getting on awards lists is important, because this is the first documentary that's been made by and about trans people for consideration. And I think awards, for better and for worse, give credibility. And in this case would give credibility to a community by elevating, the issues that are crucial. That's why I think, we care so much about these awards right now, because the community is just, it's so under fire. And I think, but going back to your question too about, trans liberation and what's the dream. I mean, I think for me, it's a hinge in a way for, it should be a hinge for justice for all. This culture is obsessed with the binary of all kinds, whether it's the binary of gender or race or, who's rich and who's poor and who has and who hasn't. And I think, this idea of crossing the binary and of making that just something to get beyond as a concept, as an ideology, that's the freedom, I think, that would change lives and make a difference and make us all feel easier, freer.
I love it. You're speaking my language. I have to, as you use the word free, just to bring us back down to where we are right now, remind us, myself, to remind you to tell our audience how you're using the film with judges. I don't think that got mentioned yet, but I heard, Wynn, that you were using it with judges to influence them in sentencing and in cases. Who wants to address that? Sam?
Sure. Yeah. Last summer, a group of California judges approached us and asked if they could use clips of the film to help educate each other around the biases they might have towards trans people that come into their courtroom. And, that's a kind of an example of the work that we dreamed about from the beginning, right? Like, how can this film really be a tool to directly affect people's lives? And that's evidence of it. So that was incredibly meaningful.
Well, I think that was a gorgeous way to end, but I do want to give you a chance to address anything that you didn't address so far. And we often end this program by asking people what is the source of their belief that sort of systemic, big change can happen. Not just that you think it might, but you have either seen it, or you've met someone, or you know someone, or you witnessed something happen that gave you the belief that this kind of hinge change can take place. I mean, you're giving us a lot of such examples, really, in the people in the film, but is there one that stands out as you do this work and the work you're going to go on to do, Sam?
That's such a great question, and it makes me just think about the way we approach disclosure, right? And this idea, which is really rooted in an abolitionist belief, right? That crime and punishment is not the answer, right? That it's about holding multiple truths at once. It's about being critical and holding people accountable, but doing it with love and context, right? And it's about second chances. And, I think disclosure, we were so committed. You said early on that we didn't demonize anybody, and that was a huge commitment of ours. That was not our goal to demonize people and toss them out. Like, we want to create a platform as a tool, right? So it's like the way that we show that like Oprah evolves, right? And that she came around and publicly holds the film. And that was incredible, and she did an interview a couple days later with Nick Adams and referred to herself as the poster child of what not to do, right? I mean, she's an incredibly, I obviously don't have to tell you all this, she's an incredibly influential, powerful woman, so to say these kind of things, that gives me some hope, right? That I mean, I already knew she had changed, but we don't know why people change. We don't know what kind of pressures or expectations or what makes people change, but to see, that you can criticize someone, and they will take accountability. And I think that gives me hope, right? That that when you do it with an intention of, I think there's also an intention of expectation. Like, we know you can do better, right? Like, there's that. And I think, it's you don't know what you don't know. And I just really believe in creating that space of, okay, we messed up, now here's an opportunity to do better, and that gives me hope.
Amy, what about you? What's the evidence you draw on?
Oh God, Laura, I came out of the AIDS epidemic. That's when I was coming up as a adult and as a professional in the arts, and was so devastated to see my community, disappear, one, person I loved after the next. But we, as community, did our best to fight for our existence and our rights, and some of us survived, and that strength and sense of, well, if you're really focused and if you care about one another and you're not dependent on biological family and you're not dependent on social structures that already exist, that you can actually change the course of what's happening. There were a lot of missteps then, and AIDS is not over. So I'm continually learning from coming up from that experience, and now going through a second pandemic. I try to be mindful of that, but I think that informs everything I do.
As June Jordan, who you also edited, once said, some of us did not die. And the key is, what do we do with that being here? Laverne, you, proof of life post-tipping point.
I do want to say that implicit bias is a thing. It's actually real. There's a lot of folks out there suggesting that someone can't be racist or transphobic without knowing that they are, that we internal, and I think disclosure is really evidence of that we've been acculturated and sort of indoctrinated through media that has created a lot of implicit bias that we should just be aware of. And it's always for me about love. And I think the evidence for me is my own life. The evidence for me is my own life. When I had a speaking engagement last week and they were reading my bio and they were saying the first trans person to be on the cover of this magazine or be nominated for this or have a wax figure at Madame Tussauds and all the things. And I was sort of what hit me that time hearing that bio was that before me, these things had not happened. And these things were happening in 2014 and 2015 and 16. And so what is sad about that is that they had not happened before me, and then that they are now happening and that I'm not the last. My friend MJ Rodriguez is just on the cover, a solo cover of Entertainment Weekly. It's her second cover, but it's her first solo cover. Trans people have been on the covers of magazines, and now another trans person's been nominated for an acting Emmy. And I'm not the last. And so for me, that gives me a tremendous amount of hope. Is it enough that one or two of us or three or four of us have been elevated and are doing well? No, that is not enough. That is not social change. That is not the revolution that we need, but it gives me a tremendous amount of hope, my own story. And
But all of that being said, you have a wax statue at Madame Tussauds?
I do. And the Madame Tussauds in San Francisco, the community voted and said they asked who should have a wax figure, and it's 2015, I believe. And they said Laverne, and they came and measured me and did all the things.
Wow.
And I asked them if they could I asked them if they could make me thinner, and they said, no. When you stand next to the wax figure, it has to look like you. And by the time the figure was revealed, I had lost a little weight. So.
Wow, Laverne, talk about bearing the lead.
Really? Why didn't we start there? Someone's going to have to go out and get some footage. I want to thank all of you for being with us. This has been a great conversation.
Okay. This was really great. Looking forward to seeing.
Well, thank you again for doing the show. I've been a fan of your work for a long time.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Bye, Matt. Bye, Laverne.
Bye, guys.